So this week's podcast, you're going to meet Warren Askew, who is the vice president at, just make sure I get this correct, airport at PortsToronto. I wanted to make sure I didn't stuff that up, but what a great interview. What an amazing guy to talk to. So much experience, literally from the bottom up, working in all different areas of the airport, and just shares some of his experience and wisdom, and you'll find it super, super reassuring. So hope you enjoy this one. You should do. So welcome, Warren, to the Lovefly podcast. Thank you for giving the time up.
Thanks for having me, Paul. It's great.
Pleasure. So you met Mr. Bond, Mr. John Bond.
I have.
And you've been very kind to get onto our podcast very quickly after meeting him. Normally the trauma of meeting him is too much. People need something. That's a joke because we've known each other a long time. But yeah, so I was really curious about your story, and I don't want to give anything away. So let's start. So tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I won't say anything about trauma with Mr. Bond. He was quite lovely, and maybe that's why I got on. So
yeah, he said people like him, but I don't.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here, Paul, and it's a great time for me to reflect on where I came from in the industry and the things that I've seen. I grew up in the UK. I was an air cadet, and that was really my very first flight. Was in a small 2-seat plane that the Royal Air Force flew, and it really intrigued me into the industry. And when I moved to Canada, I was 16, and I always knew I wanted to be in aviation. And at that time in my life, it was either air traffic control or it was being a pilot.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to pursue the air traffic control stream and went to college, did a diploma in aviation management, and realized there were so many more jobs. But I actually started off as what's called a station attendant for an airline at TorontoPorts Airport.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I was a much younger, fitter individual. And so I would load the baggage, I would push the aircraft back off of the gate, service the airplanes on the ground. And that's
where did you go for that job first?
Oh, it was just one of those things. If you wanted to get into the aviation business, you really started to, you wanted to learn from the ground up. And I wanted to be in the airline management part of the business. So I kind of changed focus a little bit from air traffic control to that. And so it was great. I learned how to marshal. I was one of those people with the 99-cent ones guiding in a $300 million aircraft. And it was great. I mean, you had to have the training, you had to understand the aircraft. And it was then that my eyes started to open to realize just how meticulous and careful and programmed the work was around the aircraft to keep everyone safe. From the paperwork that the pilots did with me on the loading of the aircraft to the maintenance checks that were done. I really got a good appreciation for how careful and how methodical aviation really is.
So perhaps give us some examples, like from being on the ramp, those sort of days, sort of things that you noticed early.
Yeah, well, I mean, you would probably see it if you're a passenger waiting in the lounge looking at the aircraft. You see the pilot walk around. And at night, they've got the flashlight. They're looking at all the key things that they have to look at. The maintenance, those are the people that you can't really pick the maintenance people from the people that are loading the bags in all cases. But there's a lot of people that have eyes on that aircraft. And, they're watching how the fueling is happening. They're watching how the aircraft is closed up after it's been loaded. So they're walking around, and they're also making sure that the paperwork's in order and that any maintenance bugs there are cleared and fixed before the plane goes out again. So, there's a lot of effort that goes into that, which is great.
I guess you wouldn't see that really, would you? And you might not even notice it, particularly on a quick turnaround. As a passenger, you might think that nothing's happening.
Right. Or as a passenger, you just see some, random people walking around the airplane. And it's, some of them are just putting food on the plane. Some of them are putting fuel on the plane. There's just so much other activity that's happening, and it's quite choreographed in many cases. But to the untrained eye, you just see a lot of bodies around. But yeah, everyone's got a role out there, which is good.
So how long was your time on sort of the ramp area?
Yeah, so I was there for about 4 years, and then I actually worked for an airline. So I was what was called a customer service supervisor, and I worked both up in the passenger service area as well as down on the ramp. So I did that for a couple of years, and again, working now closely with the dispatch center of the airline. And so now I had more of an insight as to how flights are planned and the weather that would prevent a flight from operating, or if there was another issue that would force a cancellation. And that's where I started really dialing into the fact that safety wasn't just the buzzword, it was the only way to run the business. Because and I I'll kind of fast forward a little bit in my career, but I did have 4 years outside of airports where I was working for a crown corporation that owns some bridges into the United States. And I was talking to a community one day, and I said, if I told you there was a 75% chance that you drove your car over that bridge and you could make it to the other side, would you go? And no one would put up their hand. And I said, okay, let's see who plays the lottery. What if I told you it was a 90% chance that you would make it? You might see a couple of gamblers put their hand up. And so I dialed into the fact that, again, this is 100% business. And that's where, when you started seeing how the operational decisions were made at an airline, you realize that it's 100% business. They're not going to put a plane in the air if it's not safe, or if there's an issue, or if something's not right, then they see that and they'll make the decision around that. So that was a good 2 years there. And then I moved into the tower.
If you cast your mind back, can you think of any examples of things that, where a flight was just said, no, it's not going, or we're going to delay it, and for so, seem minor to the unobserved, the untrained eye, maybe.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. I was the supervisor and it was probably 2 days before Christmas one year. And we had a lot of flights that were flying up to Northern Ontario. So North Bay, Sudbury, Timmins, Sault Ste. Marie. And they had been canceled for the 2 days prior to me getting there. And it was freezing rain. And the passengers were waiting for 2 days essentially at the airport. And there was still no forecast that was getting us to a point where it was safe to send the airplane without, because what would happen is the weather in Toronto was great, but when the plane takes off and it has to go into one of those airports and the weather's not good, if it can't land, it's coming back to Toronto. Yeah. So we don't want to send passengers there and back if you can't make your flight land at the destination. And so I remember this one lady, she was quite upset because Christmas was coming and she had to get up north. And she started talking to me, and it was, she was quite upset that she wasn't going to make it. And of course, then a crowd gathers around me.
Oh yeah.
And that it was, well, my aunt lives behind the airport. She says it's fine there. And we said,
well, that's good. Yeah.
And we're not going to send a plane because the aunt said it was fine, right? So, and it's tough, right? It's one of those things where you have to balance safety with the desire to get everyone home. And I just remember looking at this lady and I said, "Madam, nothing would please me more than to get you home right now." Yeah, honestly, yeah. And it was meant a little bit in jest, but in seriousness as well. We want to get everyone back home. We want to get people to where they're going, but we wouldn't do it in an unsafe way. So that was that was one of those remarkable things where you're kind of sitting in the lounge looking outside, and it's sunshine.
Yeah.
There's no clouds, but you're not going because of weather.
Yeah, because you literally can imagine they'd be like, "What are these cowboys playing that?" They're just you can all and you get those that the crowd stirrers, don't you? When you have like delays and stuff, people who in the military used to call them barrack room lawyers. They'd go around and they'd just go, "Right, well, what I heard was this," and they get everyone going. You get that, don't you? I've seen it when I've been delayed in places.
Yeah, a little bit of gang mentality, I suppose. Yeah.
How long were they? How long were they stuck there for in the end?
Oh, I think it was 4 days.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a brutal storm up north. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
I like that because it's because that's costly as well for the airline, isn't it? So it's not like it's cost them a fortune, so it's not their choice. But it's just, and also when you're at that airport and it all looks fine and dandy, but they can't see what you can see and what at the destination. So even
Absolutely,
it could be quite right.
The airline will not want to keep the plane on the ground if it can go, because airplanes make money when they're in the air. So that's the whole driver. But they won't do it if it's not safe.
Okay, so great. So you went from there. Then you said you went to Tower next.
Yeah. So
And the owner said, "Well, I'm getting a sense here. This is a man that can only do a few years in the job and has to move on again." Is that fair?
No, it's not. I was 4 years on the ramp, and then 2 years with the airline. But then I spent 13 years with the airport authority.
Oh,
And yes, yeah. No, I'm relatively stable. Yeah, so I started off in what was then a brand new unit that we started called the Resource Management Unit. And if any of your audience flies into Toronto Pearson, there's a tower on top of Terminal 1. And so I helped start one of the units in there and worked very closely with the people that were talking to the aircraft when they were on the ground, the apron controllers. And we planned all of the gates. We planned all of those the FID screens that passengers see. That was all being programmed from that unit as well. Baggage system, like the baggage carousels, the check-in counters, all of those things were kind of run from that one central unit.
wow. So this is a lot of hands-on. It's not like a computer program running it. It's you humans doing it by the sound.
Yeah, it's not a toaster oven with a network cable, that's for sure. So there was there's a lot of hands and eyes on things. And so we worked very closely with the airlines. We worked very closely with air traffic control and the apron controllers as well, to make sure that the airplanes could move safely while they were on the ground. And of course, a big part of that is for those of us who've arrived at an airport and wondered why you seem to be parked at the furthest point away from the customs officer.
It was your fault.
It was probably my fault. Yeah. And yeah, but sometimes there's reasons for that, and a lot of that is again, it's one of those very meticulous, very methodical ways that we look at things, which is you've got to make sure that the plane can fit on the gate. And so you may have a very big plane that's parked next to gates that can only take smaller planes, and that's why when you walk to customs, you see what looks like acres of space that's not being used.
Yeah.
There's reasons for that, of course.
That's really useful as well, because sometimes some airlines as well. I don't know if this is true, but I was told that some of the no frills airlines will pay to be sort of on remote stands rather than on on a finger to save a bit of money. Is that true, or is that myth?
Yeah, no, there's some airports with that model. And certainly low cost carriers like to be able to turn the planes very quickly. So if you see like a Ryanair, you might see them with air stairs parked on a ramp, So you get like a trolley almost, or a truck with stairs on the back.
Yeah.
And they'll park them front and back so that, as passengers are getting off the front, they can start putting passengers on at the back. And it just speeds things up. And that's how they keep some of the prices low. And in certain cases, airports will actually charge less for the airline to be on one of those stands than if they were on a gate with a bridge. And so it's all really dependent on what the airline's willing to do.
That kind of makes sense. Okay. So what other sort of considerations are going on? Because I guess a lot of people will be thinking about that, and, like at the time, and why we're waiting out at one place. So it's just literally that it feels like a sort of a really complicated game of sort of snakes and ladders, like moving everything around. And
Tetris.
Yeah. Well, that's a better version. Yeah. So how do you actually do that? Can you, like, have you got, how do you see, is it like with the eyeball, or have you got little monitors? How does it actually in practice happen,
When I started, it used to be literally an old fridge door with magnets. And so you would have the time across the top and the gates down the side, and you'd have little magnets that represented flights, and you would kind of move them up and down. And as the time changed, you would get information coming in from the airline, and you pick up the phone and they'd say, flight 123 is going to be half an hour late. So you take your magnet, you move it over half an hour. Big fridge, yeah. Big fridge, small magnets. And now it's all digital, right? So you've got probably a couple of computer monitors in front of you. Those magnets now are blobs of color on the screen that, as the airlines tell the airport they're going to be late or they're going to be early, or there's changes in which aircraft is going to operate what flight, you actually see the blobs of light moving around. But while all that's going on, of course, we're receiving information on, say, inbound aircraft to say that there's, 10 passengers that are going to require assistance when they get off the aircraft. And all of that information gets shared to all of those departments that need that information. So customs knows when the flight's coming in, that they're going to be going to customs, so they'll be ready. And then you've got all the passenger service folks that are going to be there to meet the planes with the wheelchairs and everything else that they're going to need to assist those passengers. The ramp crew know when to go out and start marshaling on the plane. It's all very choreographed, and that data, it's all data driven now. Yeah.
Wow. So the question that a nervous flyer listening will have is about backups. So what happens if there's an electricity failure, or what happens if there's, if the people working up in the tower get tired, and so it's, could you perhaps expand a little bit upon that? And I know this has all been, this is not surprise questions to you, but this is what the nervous flyer will sometimes like. Well, what if?
Yeah, absolutely. The terminals now, particularly in Canada, the Canadian airports have been very good at making sure that there's resilience there for power. And, we look at it from a climate change aspect to make sure that the airport stays resilient to those changes, to disruptions that happen. Because sometimes it may not be a power outage, sometimes it may be a heat wave that disrupts things. So it could be any number of things. But from a power,
there's a new fear for people. There you go. Yeah, sorry, it's to see a view, Warren. Heat wave. I hadn't thought about that one. Yeah.
And that's actually, it's more impactful for the staff that work outside, right? So we want to make sure that they're looked after as well. And so they would go out for half an hour, and they may have to come in for 10 minutes to cool down before they go back out again. But the power situations usually are pretty good at airports. We're mandated to have backup power for our airfields to keep the lights and all the navigation aids on. We have rules around when the weather is bad, that we have to have 2 independent sources of power turned on. Like it's very well thought out and quite resilient for those kinds of issues. The gate planners, when I first started, we would train them on how to use that digital software that I was telling you about, but we would also have paper templates ready to go that if things went sideways for us, we could actually still continue to plot out the day. It's just we're going to need pencils and erasers. So we're kind of there ready for that, but we're at the point now where these systems are so redundant and so resilient,
Yeah.
that it's pretty stable, pretty consistent.
Yeah. I mean, I think you got these films like the Bruce Willis type films where you've got these things and I think that's what's in people's minds, isn't it? The Hollywood version of the events. Yeah.
Absolutely, and this is why my spouse does not like watching movies with airports or airplanes with them, and she kind of looks at me because I might be tutting or huffing under my breath, because I would say that's not how it would happen. Yeah,
I'm annoying
but
like that as well.
yeah.
I'm not as polite as that though, to be honest.
So it makes for a great movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, not very helpful if you're trying to get on a plane and go somewhere and feel good about it, I suppose. But yeah, these things, my of course now I'm VP at my own airport here, and I tell my staff that the measure of success for me is our ability to stay out of the news. And every day that goes by and we're not in the headlines is a good day. And that's how it should be, right? Like we should not be felt or experienced other than in a good way, that people are being able to come to the airport, have a relaxing atmosphere in which to wait for their flight, get on the plane leaves either early or on time, they get to where they're going, and they're able to pick up their bags.
Yeah.
And every time that we do that is a good news story, and a story that no one hears about.
That's right.
And I always say, because there's some jobs that you wish you don't have, and I think one of the toughest jobs to have is the airline baggage agent, who waits at the carousel behind a desk, and no one ever goes up to them and says, "Thank you, I got my bag." It's only when there's a problem that people are looking for them. So that's it.
It's very robust character. I mean, you think you do that job.
That's right.
Well, I feel like you jumped a bit there, Warren. You've gone, we gone from the tower, and now we're suddenly VP. I'm sensing there's a bit more of a journey in the middle there somewhere.
Yeah. So I worked at the tower for the airport authority for 7 years. I did a little bit of work down in terminal ops. So I was just for a few months. I was a shift manager for the terminal. So very hands on, talking to passengers. But then I moved into my role as manager of aviation regulations and safety management systems. And that's where I saw kind of that government influence, if you will, the regulator saying these are the standards that you have to meet as an airport, from the color of the lights and where you put them to the signage on the airfield.
This is great. Tell us about this. This is good stuff. I know I'm a bit of a nerd. No, we know, but or dweeb. But it's just this is the stuff that people love to know about, because it's the level of detail. I think is very reassuring. So yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So the regulation, like if you look at an airfield, if I could take you out onto our airport, for example, you would see the same colored lights at the side of the runway as any other runway in probably in the world, right? I think everyone's got the same standards. And the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is a part of the UN, they determine kind of global standards and practices, and then each country subscribes to those. So in Canada, I could take you to any of those runways, and they would all look and feel the same. The markings, like the white lines, the fact that they are white and they're not yellow on the runway is a standard that we have to meet. And the length of those markings and how they look. The whole intent is to make every airport look and feel the same way consistently for the pilot.
Yeah.
Because the moment that the pilot notices something different, it's a distraction. And so that's the level of detail that we go to make everything as vanilla as we can. And so, runway lights, the spacing between the lights. So the side lights are always white, and they're 200 feet or 60 meters apart from each other. And that's done for a reason too. So when a pilot's at the end of the runway waiting to take off and they can only see 3 lights, well, that's about 600 feet of visibility. So they know what kind of visibility. So everything's kind of measured out, right? And that's very consistent. Yeah. And it's all very, very purposeful and with intention. So, taxiway lights are blue on the sides. So when you're if you're a passenger on a plane, you're looking out the window, you'll see the blue lights all the way out to the runway, and then you get to the runway, they're white. So lights and signage is all done in a particular way that all the signs look and feel the same. It's the same font, the same color background, and all of the background colors mean different things.
How on earth did they get all of that? I mean, like across the world to get that must have taken forever.
It's taken years, and all of this really started coming together in the 40s. And we're at the point now where the application of these standards, not just at airports, but also with airlines as well, we're getting to the point where the rates of accidents and incidents are getting so low that we can't actually get any more trends out of the data, which is a really positive thing. But it's always, we're not really learning anything new. It's more like, well, we learned that lesson. Why wasn't it applied? But it's come down to such a rate now that it's really difficult to kind of glean any of that info. But it has taken years, and you've got an industry that's really positive in terms of the approach that it's taken to safety and security, and it's really pushed the limits in some ways.
Yeah, that's very reassuring. So there are some questions I'd like to ask you about that from a sort of general sort of safety point of view, but because you seem to know your way around the airport stuff, and people are quite interested. And now I'm getting interested because I've noticed different colours, but I've never tweaked like the change. Some people may have done. Obviously, I'm not a pilot, so when you look around the airport, there's lots of other different lights that you see, and you sometimes and also the aircraft themselves have certain lights on in certain. What are all those about? Because that seems to be pretty consistent, But I've never sort of worked out what's that light on, or what's that do? I wonder if you could satisfy the dork part of me and answer some of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the most visible thing that someone would see if you're waiting for your flight, you may actually see your aircraft come onto the gate. And so you'll see the aircraft, is particularly at night, but really these lights are on all the time that the aircraft's operating. You will see lights as the plane's coming towards you. You'll see a green light and a red light. And that comes from nautical times. If you are on a boat, the port side is red and the starboard side is green. And so aviation did the same thing. So when you're looking at the aircraft coming towards you, you will see a green light on the left, which is the starboard side of the aircraft, and a red light on the wingtips, which is the port side. And that's a safety feature, actually. So if you're flying at night, and this is typically more for smaller aircraft, if you see a red and a green light, then you know that you're actually behind an airplane. And if you see a green and a red light, then you know that the plane's coming towards you. And so you can both act.
Yes.
Sensible. Yeah. So you'll see those lights on when the plane, even in the plane at the gate. And then the other big light that you'll see, and there's typically one on top and one on the bottom.
Yeah.
The red collision lights. And so what those are, they're red beacons. They used to spin. Now the planes have the LED lights that light up like Christmas tree lights. And those lights you will see when the airplane is in operation. So you'll see them blink as the plane comes onto the gate. Once the plane is parked, you'll see people like me back in the mid-90s run out with chocks that go in front of the wheels. And that allows the pilots to take off the brakes, let the brakes cool down while the plane turns around, and the plane's not going to roll anywhere. And at that point, the engines will shut down, those red lights will turn off, and they'll stay off until the plane's ready to go again. And then they'll turn them back on. And it does something amazing on the ground, because once those red lights go on, typically at an airport, what you'll see is no one will approach the aircraft. So all those vehicles that are kind of going behind and in front of the aircraft, they will all stop because they know that that plane is about to move. And so that's generally the rule that you would see. So it's a great indicator for the ground staff to say that plane's going to move.
That's really useful to think about. So presumably then, if they start the engines and the little blinky light doesn't work, that's a no-go item.
That's a no-go item. Yeah, they got to have that one working.
And is there a backup? Because everything's got a backup.
No, actually, I shouldn't say that, because what you do see on some planes is you'll have two lights.
Yeah.
Certainly the older L1011s, they used to have two rotating ones. And so if one went out, you all still had the other one going. But you've got one on top and one on the bottom. So typically the people on the ramp want to see the one on the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's good. Good. So, so you moved into this area where you're looking at like all the government controls and all the rest of it. So perhaps you can give us a bit of a flavour of, some of the things that are in place. And I guess you can talk about your airport, but you can talk about other airports and perhaps globally that make people realise just how much is thought about and how we've got this sort of safety margins to be so, just ridiculous, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's the standards to have an airport, you have to be certified. So what I like to say in Canada is that there are aerodromes, which means anywhere that a plane can take off or land. Not all aerodromes are airports, but all airports are aerodromes. So what happens is you can be an aerodrome, and then when you get certified, then you become an airport. And typically airlines aren't going to fly into aerodromes. They're going to fly into airports.
So what's the difference between an aerodrome and an airport then, in sort of simple speak?
One is certified and the other one is not.
Right, okay.
And so an aerodrome would be, you might have a little business crop spraying, and so you need to have a grass strip for you to take off and land on.
Yeah.
You might have a cottage up north, and you want to land on a lake, and there's a water aerodrome there.
Okay.
So these are your general aviation kind of light airplanes, privately owned planes. They're flying in and out of aerodromes typically. Airports are certified. So there's a very stringent standard that you have to meet. And those standards talk about the light signs and markings that we talked about. It talks about the need to have a wildlife control program, which actually tells us how high the grass should be at the sides of the runways. Like everything's thought out. Like we don't just cut grass to make the place look good. We cut grass at the airports to make sure that we reduce the chance of wildlife. It talks about, building heights around your runways. And so you can't have buildings that are too high. Otherwise, that would become a problem for airplanes that are using your airport. So all of these things are factored in. And of course, we have to have standards around firefighting and rescue capabilities should something happen. The training standards that those officers need to meet. We have the need for safety management system to be in place, and what that safety management system should contain. So all of these things are the standards to meet. And then in our case here, we Transport Canada will assign an inspector to our airport, and they will do compliance checks on us. So for us to maintain our certification, we have to do all of those right things, and then they come in and check periodically to ensure that we're continuing to run in a safe way.
Wow, that's very reassuring. So tell us a little bit about your airport, like some of the the safety that you've put in place, and also the comfort side of it. Things that you've changed, things you're hoping to put in place. And also just out of curiosity, how do you keep birds away? Because I've heard so many different stories around this. So obviously you keep the grass to a certain length, but I've heard lots of different airports use lots of different things. I'm just curious what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked at an airport where we actually allowed soybeans to be grown because the soybeans provide or did not provide a habitat for small mammals that then the coyotes would eat, right? So we don't want coyotes out on our runway. That would be a problem.
Convenient.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we don't want a habitat where certain bugs, insects grow, because then birds come, right? And we don't want birds around our airport. So all of these things are thought about in terms of not only scaring away the things that we have, but making sure that the habitat is such that it doesn't create that interest to be there in the first place. And so my airport, or our airport, is the Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport. We're in downtown Toronto. We're on an island. We're surrounded by parkland. We're surrounded by the city. And so we have pretty robust processes with the city to make sure that when they're planning on developing a certain area, that the building heights are all the right height. So we work very closely with the planning department. We would take an interest in, say, and we don't have this problem where we are, but other airports have, where all of a sudden a new landfill, kind of a garbage dump, if you will, gets opened up close by. Well, that's going to attract the birds to come in and feed there, right? Especially if it's if there's interesting stuff. So airports typically get involved in those kinds of things off airport as well. In our case, we're on an island, and to make sure that we don't have big boats parked kind of at the end of our runway where the mast may be too high for us, we have what's called a marine exclusion zone. And so if you go out into the inner harbor here on a water taxi or a boat or even one of the city ferries, you would see the white buoys that say "danger, keep out," and people do, because they know what that area is all about. And then we actually monitor the area in real time as well. And so we've got surveillance out there that makes sure that no kayakers are in that area.
Wow.
So that's very unique to us.
Yes.
Yeah. And then just from a general airport perspective, I mean, for us, it's been really interesting to see that over half of our passengers now are using means other than their car to get to the airport. So they're using a lot of public transit, or they're cycling in the summer in particular, or they're walking. And I've seen people walk through the snow with their, rolly bags behind them, and they will walk to the airport because it's very close and it's convenient and efficient.
Yes.
And that really puts people in a different mindset when they go traveling, is that, oh, that's my local neighborhood airport. I know where it is.
Yeah.
It's going to be a predictable way. I'm not going to get stuck in traffic. I can get
Yeah.
there. And so when they arrive at the airport, passengers are generally a little bit more calm. And then, you can actually, you've got your pick. You can take a tunnel, because we're on an island. So you can walk under the Western Gap, which is a body of water, and you can get to the airport that way. Or you can actually take a 90-second ferry ride. And for passengers that have been there before, sometimes they like to take the ferry ride. Very relaxing.
Yeah.
You stand on the passenger deck, you get a great view of the city, people take pictures, and it's literally a 90-second cruise over to the island. But when you get to the airport, it's pretty compact. You don't have great walking distances. You can actually see from the departures level where you came into the terminal, where you're going to check in, and if you're going domestic, you're going that way, and if you're going international, you're going that way. And there's the security checkpoints right there. So when you're walking up, you can see if there's lineups or not, and typically we don't. And then you go into the lounge, and it's a very relaxing area. There's no gates to go to. You sit in a common lounge, and you can see all of your boarding points.
Nice.
And so it's very calming for people. We hear it all the time that people like flying from the airport because it's just very chill. It's a very quiet atmosphere. People love it.
So how many people would you say go through? I don't know if you're able to sort of reveal that, but sort of like in ballpark figures, how many people per year traveling through there? And what sort of places are you servicing?
Yeah, so we look after about 2 million passengers a year right now. In 2019, before the pandemic, was our peak year, so we were about 2.8 million.
Right.
And that was good for ninth place in Canada in terms of total numbers of passengers. We're about the fifth busiest airport into the US from Canada right now. And we're building the US pre-clearance facility. So that's going to allow you to clear US customs at the airport here before you go into the United States. So when you go through that whole process, you'll come out the other side into the lounge, knowing that you don't need to clear customs when you get to your destination. So people find that very relaxing in itself. Because then you can really just take stock. Okay, there's somewhere to get food, you can find a nice place to sit. We don't typically have airport benches; they're more like loungers everywhere. So it's a much it's a pretty elevated experience. In terms of destinations, we're very limited, just because of the runway length that we have to the kinds of planes that we have. And so that really drives where we can fly to. So we go as far west as Thunder Bay, and as far east as St. John's. And then we've got 4 destinations right now into the United States, soon to be 6 airports in 4 cities, because another airline's just announced service starting March 29th. So we will be flying Boston, Newark, New York, LaGuardia, New York, Chicago O'Hare, Chicago Midway, and Washington Dulles.
Oh, wow.
So we're a busy little airport.
So yeah, I mean, I like a small airport. There's a few in the UK like that. I don't know if you remember, like the Southamptons, and even I'd go so far as to say Birmingham is not too hideous either. It's not, those, for those who know the UK airports, but some of the bigger ones like Heathrow and Gatwick, that's trauma going from it. But I mean, like the JFK, going through there, you just get lost. Those sort of
and JFK's got many terminals, and typically they're and you see that a little bit in Heathrow, where you get airlines that take terminals, right? And so they kind of centralize in certain areas, but every airport has a role. And I think that's really important for people to know. If you're traveling internationally, you're going to be going to a bigger airport,
Yeah.
typically. And you'll see that connectivity that's kind of coming in and out requires airplanes that are big, and so you need more real estate, bigger terminals, longer places or longer distances to walk. Our airport is more of a regional airport. Now we're flying into major centers like New York and Ottawa and Montreal, but it's we don't have 767s or that beats me 787s and big buses as aircraft. I got to remember that I'm one of those people now. I got gray hair. But that's just the benefit of flying out of a smaller airport is typically you won't see a whole lot of that, and so the Southamptons of the world would do well. The very first airport. So here's a bit of a kickback. I was 15, and it was my work experience at comprehensive school. And I did a week work experience 1 week at what was then called Lulsgate Airport, which of course is now Bristol. So I spent
Well, that's a cute airport. That's a good airport as well. Yeah, I like that one. Yeah. Very good. So what's the aspiration for this? No, in fact, I want to go back. What made you go and work there? Presumably you've got the whole Canada, I suppose presumably the US. Why that airport? What attracted you?
Well, my journey didn't end at Pearson with safety and regulations. I went to a small airport actually in Hamilton, which is about an hour away from Toronto. And so I was the director of ops there for several years. And it's a different focus where at a bigger airport you might be an inch wide on an issue and a mile deep, so you become very good at that one issue and you know a lot about it. To being very broad based knowledge, like you need to know a little bit about a lot. And then after that, I went to the Federal Bridge Corporation. And so that was my time at the bridge right before the pandemic. And we actually had 4 bridges that we looked after. And so that was kind of interesting as well, because a lot of what we do in aviation can actually be applied.
Yes.
Not everything, but some. And it's all to get people in and out of your facility as safely and quickly and efficiently as possible. And so that was really interesting. And so it got to a point where this opportunity popped up on my radar. And there's a degree of truth that there's jet fuel that run in our veins when you've worked at an airport for long enough. And I could smell the fumes, if you will, and I needed to come back, and so I became the vice president for the airport here, and happy to do it. This is a really interesting airport in that it's got a lot of constraints. It's got a very unique governance structure where the airport is owned by the Toronto Port Authority. So I'm a PortsToronto employee. And so we're the only marine port authority in Canada that owns an airport. So it's a very unique structure. It's very different to other airports. And so it's part challenge. It's part just loving the fact that that I can serve the community in a different way. Because one thing that people should be aware of is airports don't serve themselves. They serve the communities in which they're located. And so for me, it's not about the airport. It's about what the airport does for the region. Yeah.
So what's the aspirations in your tenure? What if you could when you walk away from this particular role? I mean, you stay there and move upwards. Who knows? But what are your goals for that airport or for your area?
Well, maybe more to come, and I'll be able to come back and share some of that. But right now, we've got some really important things that we have to achieve, and two of them. There's two particular examples. One is the opening of our pre-clearance facility.
Cool.
So that is the first one in, I think, 15 years that's been opened in Canada. There's only going to be 9 of them once ours is opened. And so there's not many of these facilities around the world. So that's a pretty big deal. And the other one is the creation of our runway end safety areas. So as I said, we're a certified airport. And so sometimes the regulator can say, now you have to do something new. And that's what all the airports in Canada are going through right now. And we have to build what's called a runway end safety area. So it's not runway, but it's an area that is safe for an airplane, that if they have to stop the takeoff roll and they can't quite stop at the end of the runway, that there's a safe place for them to actually stop. Now, for us, that's quite complicated because we're on an island. So we literally have to build land right now to do that. And that project will be complete in 2027. So we'll be able to catch our breath a little bit and then start really pushing on the future. But yeah, hopefully you'll have me back and we can talk more about that.
No, that's really good. I'm really grateful for your time, and I'm just going to ask one last question before I let you get on with your job. Sorry, and it's just because of your experience. If you had to sum up why you think commercial aviation is so safe, or why people who are scared of flying can seek comfort from knowing what you've got in your head, what sort of thing would you say?
You know, I never take away the feelings that people have. I never diminish them, right? And I think that's important for us to acknowledge.
Yes.
But there's two things. And it's kind of a left brain, right brain type of thing. The first is the data. If you're data driven, look at the data. And it will tell you that aviation is incredibly safe as a form of transportation. Now, not everyone subscribes to that, in that doesn't necessarily resonate to the point where those feelings, you can kind of manage it.
Yeah.
But understand this, the crew that gets on that airplane, they want to go home to their families too.
Yes.
And so there's a human element to this. There's science behind it. There's decision making. There's checks. There's balances. There's standards. There's all of those things that we've been talking about today. At the end of the day, and you can go online and you can see videos of this actually recently, where a captain got on the PA, the plane was loaded, ready to go, and they said, I don't like something that I'm seeing from the plane. I'm being told it's okay, but I don't like it, and so we're not going. And the people at the front end of the plane, at the pointy end of the plane, they have families, they have plans. They won't put themselves or you in any kind of risk, right? So from that standpoint, if you look at the whole picture, I've never hesitated getting on an airplane, and I see what goes on in the background, and that's part of the reason why I don't hesitate.
That's a great answer.
Good.
Warren, brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for your time. That was awesome. Lots of great nuggets of wisdom in there, and I love the stories as well. And yeah, I'd love to love you come back in a couple of years. Tell us what you've been up to and the plans that you've got when you get down, take breath again after extending into the harbour, and what are the things you're doing. Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Glad it's helpful.